certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
Yes.
Well, everything has got to have rules. Rules. There are rules about horror movies. There are rules methodologically and aesthetically about movies in general. There are rules governing our behavior in society. There are even metaphysical and mathematical rules governing the processes of the universe. The thing about all these rules is that they may or may not be total bullshit. But it's hard to tell, because it's hard for a movie character to step outside of the rules of the movie, and it's hard for us to step outside of the rules that have conditioned our lives. But even if the rules are ultimately total bullshit and arbitrary and made up, they do a pretty good job of governing everything in our existence. So for better or worse, here are the rules.
Yes.
You can never have sex.
Not the most popular rule. Don't have sex. Don't have sex. If you have sex, you will die. Why will you die? Well, you can argue that, like many of the products of our culture, the horror movie is traditionally visualized from the perspective of a heterosexual male viewership, which fetishizes the ostensible purity of the female character, identifying sadistically with the monster, the murderer, and pursuing the object of supposedly untainted beauty through the voyeuristic lens of the camera, so you have to be a virgin. If you do have sex, you become expendable, because your expression of sexual freedom transgresses the normative structure of our patriarchal society from which the horror movie is in the first place derived, and that transgression must be punished. So please, don't have sex.
Big logo! Big logo! Sex equals death, okay? Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs.
Also not a popular rule. Don't do drugs. Don't do drugs. If you do drugs, you will die. Why will you die? Well, because transcendent psychedelic visions are a dangerous disruption of normative behavior as well. The horror movie is addressing a conflict between two primordial elements: the regularized ordering of human life and the seething amoral chaos that's constantly bubbling beneath its surface. And getting fucked up, like fucking in general, transgresses that order. It's a transgression that plunges you into the unsanctioned primordial chaos from which you cannot return because you have sinned. So don't do drugs. Don't do it.
The sin factor. It's a sin. It's an extension of number 1. And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
You know the beer, you want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back!
Rule number 3, don't say you'll be right back. Why not say that you'll be right back? Because you can't come back. Because once you've gone beyond the bounds of our little group, beyond the societal boundaries, and transgressed the rules of sexual and psychochemical purity and normativity, you have to be ostracized, or imprisoned, or sometimes stabbed to death. These are the rules, and they're problematic rules. Although maybe in some sense they're rules that you've encountered on your life experience, even if you haven't been chased by a masked murderer. By the way, I did not invent the rules. I'm just the guy who's been cast to tell you about the rules. But maybe you've encountered them, because in a sense the rules are just a more acute specification of the rules of life, the regulative and prohibitory structures that structure our experience. And this notion that the rules of horror movies resemble the rules of life has the unfortunate implication that in some sense, life is a horror movie. And it is, you know, scary. Scary. Life's a horror movie. You die in the end. There are rules for survival. There's a lot of violent men. Your small sphere of agency is determined by your role, and you may be exterminated by forces beyond your control. Life is a horror movie you didn't ask to have a part in. Most of us are extras in the background partying. You have to play by the rules until death lets you depart from them, and you can say, I'll be right back, but you might not get your part again. Life is a horror movie because it's brief and filled with ghosts. The old ideas that get recycled and hold our minds engrossed and keep us in the dark, ignoring the millions that are grossed by those who are profiting on our fears. Also, sometimes it's literally gross. Life is a horror movie. It's hard to tell the villain from the friend. You know it will end, but you never know until then. The just pursue the villains using clues from what their lust is, but sometimes they don't catch him. Sometimes the villain is the justice. Kevin. Is a horror movie. It will make you feel unsettled, and depending on what your role is, the police will not be helpful. There are some redeeming features, but there's also lots of evil, and oftentimes that evil is the result of other people. And Fritz. Life is a horror movie. No. And if there are rules of the genre, those are rules we must rewrite. The past doesn't have to be present. The lead doesn't have to be white. We can get fucked up, and with consent, we could fuck one another tonight. So fuck rules 1 and 2. And you can even say, I'll be right back, even though we don't know when life's screen fades to black, whether it will be reborn or dissolved beyond retrieval. But be good to other people. Live as though there will be a sequel. As long as all of our plots are mutually constructive and not cruel, and you don't fuck it up for anyone else, that's the only rule.